Hello, everyone. Welcome to this conversation about fair trade and the global impact of money spent right here in Missoula. My name is Carol Schwartz, and I'm the Fair Trade and Marketing Director here at the Jeannette Rankin Peace Center. I'm so excited to be joined by Anna Bottala and Denise Atwood, who are two folks from Fair Anita and Ganesh Himal, respectively, which are two of our wholesale suppliers at our fair trade store. Ganesh Himal is a company that we've been buying from for quite a while, and they are longstanding members of the Fair Trade Federation. And Fair Anita is a little bit newer to the scene, but they've made a big splash in the time that they have been kind of in the fair trade world, and they're a big hit. Their jewelry is a big hit in our store. So I want to invite them to kind of introduce themselves a little bit. Anna, maybe we'll start with you if you just want to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about Fair Anita and kind of how you got caught up in fair trade.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. This is so fun. I'm so glad to be a part of this event. So I work with Fair Anita. We are a pretty small company. We've been around for about 6 years now, and it was founded by a woman named Joy, who is one of my dearest friends. And she started it when she was 24 years old. So she was so young. We're now like 31. And it's been a really fun journey to go from a startup company where we're figuring out all the aspects of growing a business to now being a little bit more established. We design all of our jewelry and accessories here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then partner with really talented women in 9 different countries around the world. So yeah, that's a little bit about Fair Anita and myself.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I wish I'd been that productive at 24. And then Denise, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Ganesh Himal?
Yeah, so I'm a little older. Actually, it's interesting. We did start Ganesh Himal when I was about 24, but that was about 37 years ago. So we've been working with artisans in Nepal since 1984, and we work with 17 different producer groups. All of them are very, very different. Some, like the Association for Craft Producers in Nepal, we've worked with since 1986. They work with up to about 1,000 women throughout Nepal. Other groups are very small, just family cottage industries. We are involved in creating a lot of different products. We have over 1,000 products that we carry. Keeps us pretty busy. We have shipments that come every 2 months from Nepal. So people are constantly getting orders and constantly receiving payment. And so we try to create a great amount of stability within those producer groups. So we sell to stores like Jeannette Rankin. We've been working, I think, I was talking to Martha Newell this morning. I think we have sold to Jeannette Rankin since 1991.
That's when we started, so that sounds good.
Anita Doyle, I think, started the store, and we started working with Anita, and I met Martha through that. So yeah, so we work basically on very long-term relationships with both our producer groups and our customer base, and are very excited to see organizations like Fair Anita coming on board, because it just shows that this whole thing is really moving. We started before there was even a Fair Trade Federation, and it just thrills me to no end to see all of the new people coming forward and working in partnership with people throughout the world.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Anna and I were kind of chatting before we kind of got rolling about just the community aspect of fair trade and how that is true kind of from every aspect of it, even down to just the relationships here between, you guys and the store selling it and us and the customers. There's so much community aspect, and that's really part of what makes it so special, it seems like. But let's see. So one of the questions I had come in from our people on Instagram was kind of what products did you guys start with? Maybe I'll let Anna take this one first. Just, what products got Fair Anita going initially?
Oh, absolutely. So we really saw a gap in the fair trade market where there was a lot of jewelry that was more targeted towards an older demographic and maybe a little bit more expensive. So we are designing jewelry for younger women who they might be right out of college and want to buy fair trade or ethically made products, but don't necessarily have a large budget to do that. And so our little tagline is cute, ethical, and affordable. So we started with jewelry, but then we've really branched out. We're trying to do more with sustainability pieces. We have bamboo utensils and straw sets that have been a bestseller. We've got like a collapsible, reusable tote bag, where we've got lots of new designs coming for the holiday season, which I'm excited about. But yeah, we're just trying to test things out and expand from just jewelry and accessories.
Nice. Yeah, the jewelry, like I mentioned when I introduced it, the jewelry has really been a big hit in our store, and I'm seeing a lot of folks really gravitate towards kind of that different style in the jewelry that is a little bit newer to our store and is very kind of contemporary. And I think that affordability component is huge, because I think there's still this really big misconception out there that fair trade means expensive, which is, I encounter that all the time when people come in, they are so shocked that stuff's affordable, which is always a little interesting to me, but it's a big learning curve, I think, for folks.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
yeah, but Denise, you guys, I believe, started with sweaters. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we weren't even planning to, I mean, I was on my way to law school, so I was not planning to do a business, but we had taken some time off. We both have environmental degrees, and we'd taken some time off to travel in the Himalayas and met a Tibetan refugee family. And that was really what started us off. And they did beautiful knits. And we had taken some of their knits on some pretty arduous treks up into the Himalayas. And we came back and said to them, these are so beautiful. And, you know, thank you so much, because you kept us very warm. And those were the days before fleece even existed, which is kind of unimaginable now. And they said, you're welcome. And can you help us market them? And we were like, well, we don't really know how to do that. And, but then we started to think about, one of the things they really wanted to do was to send their kids to school. And they didn't get a lot of help from the Nepali government. And they knew that they couldn't tell the world about Tibet unless their children were educated. And so I've been a longtime social justice nut. And so we thought, gosh, you know, maybe we could help them at least try to figure out a way to find a market. And then that was kind of the beginning of it. And we still work with knits. Knits are, you know, really fundamental to what we do, because it's a really home-based type of work that women can do while they're watching their children or dealing with their, you know, if they're not comfortable working outside their homes. A lot of the women we work with are have been severely abused, and so they can kind of work in the comfort of their home and still make income, make a good income. So yeah, knits are a big part, but we have each different producer group. We do a lot of kitchen textiles, a lot of different things like that. So again, you know, like for Anita, I think once, you know, we make a commitment to a group, then we really try to make it so that they have a sustainable amount of work to do and can get orders every 2 months.
That's wonderful. I know that was one of the big questions I fielded in the store, was kind of just the impacts of COVID on the artisans that are making these products. You know, because I think generally if people are coming into our store, for the most part, unless it's the first time they've wandered in, they're kind of aware of fair trade and, you know, what we do and what that means. And so when I would say, like, you know, they'd ask about sales and say, well, our sales are down, and they would recognize that that extends out further than that. So I guess kind of, you know, along those lines, how has COVID, I mean, the big elephant in the room, how has that kind of impacted your artisans this past year, and kind of what steps have you guys taken to help make that easier on them if you can? Maybe since you were kind of just touching on that, Denise, if you want to tackle that first.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I really feel really fortunate because I have such a long-term perspective on this, and we have worked with so many of the artisan groups that we have for really 20 plus years. And one of the things I was really I guess, I don't know if you can say happy to see with COVID was that, because people are getting orders every 2 months and getting income, they have a really strong base of resiliency. That Nepal has been through a lot in the last 36 years. They've been through a civil war, they've been through a huge earthquake, they've been through so many different things. And so through all of that, we've learned how to kind of roll with it and be flexible and tighten our belts when we need to, and expand them when we need to. So all of the artisans knew that they had, first of all, we had just gotten a big shipment in like I think it was the 19th of March, and we closed on like the 20th or something. And so everyone had just gotten a really big payment of goods. And so we did have to miss one shipment, but everyone knew that if they needed any help, they could get it. We have these worker development funds that we have in Nepal that are aside from the their regular income. And those worker development funds, they knew that they could dip into if they needed to, or that we could give them some kind of advances. The biggest problem was our Producer Partner Association for Craft Producers, because they actually have a lot of infrastructure. And so they had a lot of operational expenses. And so we have a nonprofit arm, the Conscious Connections Foundation, and we were able to work with stores like Jeannette Rankin and others to raise funds for their operational costs, because they don't have any PPP loan. So CCF was able to raise over $40,000 to get to them for their operational costs. So those kinds of things all came into play. But now it's kind of back into, as of August, we were kind of working our way back into some kind of normalcy. But it has worked out okay.
That's wonderful to hear. And it seems like in the context of this, having that length of time being up and running was probably very beneficial to you guys.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I'm curious if, Anna, for you guys, not having been running as long and not having kind of that length of history, how you guys managed to kind of weather that, and what kind of creativity came out of the woodwork to make it through.
Oh, absolutely. It really has been a roller coaster of a year. And we've been so lucky that, to partner with Jeannette Rankin and other stores to kind of help keep us afloat and the orders coming in. In March, we had just been to a big trade show like 4 weeks prior to that. And so we had been able to ship some of the orders that were placed, but a lot of the stores, they'll go to a trade show and then say, well, I want it shipped in May or June or July. And so I think we wrote over 70 orders, and half of those were canceled, which of course made so much sense because our stores had to close, and every state is different. And so some were closed for April, May, some were closed longer, and it really just varied. And but thankfully we were able to pivot to making face masks. So our artisan partners in India and Cambodia made face masks. And as soon as the international borders opened, I think it was towards the end of April, we were able to start getting the shipments. And that made a huge difference. And one of our goals, we didn't want to profit off of the pandemic, so we donate 100% of the profits from our face masks. So we've donated about $70,000 back to our artisan partners. We created an emergency relief fund, and thankfully our artisan partners have been pretty safe and stable, but they've been able to use those funds to help people in their community who don't have these fair trade jobs to kind of rely on. So it's been an interesting year. We pivoted. We do a lot of pop-up markets. We started as just doing retail, so selling through our website and pop-up markets back in the day, and then we added wholesale in as a way to grow. And with this last year, we haven't been able to do all the festivals and markets that we normally do. And so this past winter in November, we collaborated with Global Mamas, which is another Minneapolis-based fair trade organization organization, and a handful of other fair trade companies that normally rely on doing pop-ups as well. And we were able to put together a fair trade pop-up market, and it was so fun. We found tons of furniture off of Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and were able to furnish the place for free. And the landlords, they had a big heart for fair trade, so we were able to get a big discount on rent, and it really helped us weather the storm of not having that revenue coming in. So it was a really fun collaboration. And like you said about the community aspect of fair trade, like we, here are brands that could be competitors, but we all kind of pooled our resources and came together and shared the different shifts, and it ended up being a really beautiful collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that's so interesting about fair trade that's so different than the regular business marketplace, is that, I do feel like what Anna was talking about, that we all come together, we all try to really promote each other, and we spend a lot of time working with people to help stores just get their websites up so that they could start selling to other people. And it's so fun to have that collaboration and relationship side of business on this end, as well as the collaboration and relationship on the producer side as well.
Yeah, that's remarkable. What strikes me too is just the creativity in problem solving coming from both of you guys and your companies, in kind of the face of unreal kind of crisis, and the creativity that has come out of that, and the coming together in that community is really special, which that's, I think, and perhaps you've already answered this question kind of in that one of the things that our followers on Instagram were asking is why people choose to do fair trade as a business model over just doing a traditional business model and choosing to run it ethically, or giving money back, or what is it about the fair trade model specifically that drew you guys to it, and maybe it is that community aspect, but maybe Anna, if you want to kind of address that first.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think part of it has to do with the accountability. We're members of the FTF, the Fair Trade Federation, and it really, being members of that organization really makes us, it challenges us, and they're the 9, or is it 10 principles? I can't remember, but making sure that you're not employing children. Like, this should just be a basic rule across the board. But in a lot of countries, in sweatshops, kids are not in school, they're working in these factories. And I think the gender equity and making sure that women have a seat at the table and opportunities to earn income and have dignity, and all of those factors, the respect for the environment, I think the accountability and the transparency of being a fair trade business really challenges us and makes us true to our standards and values.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Denise, do you find that to be true for you guys as well?
Yeah, we're a little bit different in that the Fair Trade Federation didn't exist when we started, but there was the North American Alternative Trade Organization. And so that was really fun because we got to be involved. Once we kind of decided, well, we knew when we started our business that there was, respect was at the base, partnership was at the base, reciprocity was at the base. All of those things that really are incorporated within the fair trade principles were at the base. But it was really cool because we got to, I went with Martha Newell from Missoula to the North American Alternative Trade Organization conference in Washington, D.C., where we began to form the Fair Trade Federation. And it was then that we really realized that we had a lot of peers out there, and we had communicated early on before we really started our business with what was then Pueblo to People, and also Self-Help Crafts, which then became 10,000 Villages, and really asked them. I think the model had been up until then that you would always create a nonprofit, and then you would work as a nonprofit. And our question to them was, can you do a business responsibly? And it was a resounding yes. And that, you know, like that we heard from Self-Help Crafts that, I mean, like I wrote a handwritten letter and they wrote back and they were so nice. And they said, yes, you can do a business responsibly as a for-profit. And yes, you should, because it shows an example that you don't, you know, our goal is to work ourselves out of fair trade, you know, because we want everything to be fair trade. And so unless businesses can show that example, everybody always thinks, oh, it's only in the nonprofit world, which is also a good world to live in. But so anyway, so that was kind of our entrance into it, was because we wanted peers and we wanted to grow that community, and we wanted to see trade as a avenue for creating fairness and a greater justice in the world.
You know, that resonates so much with me, Denise, what you just said. I mean, because obviously Jeannette Rankin Peace Center we are a nonprofit, and we talk about that all the time, that just the weird dynamic of being a nonprofit, and that is the goal. You're trying to work yourself out of a job, essentially. That's, you know, that is the end perfect dream for most nonprofits, is to solve the problem, and then you don't need to exist anymore in a perfect world. And yeah, that's I think a great lens to look at fair trade through, you know, whether it's fair trade or, you know, I know certified B Corp companies, you know, I think the ultimate goal is for everything to fall within that parameter. And yeah, I think that I agree, you know, showing that you can do that in a traditional business model is so important for taking that step and moving, you know, that.
We had people tell us, business professors, everyone would tell us, you know, they were like, you cannot do business this way. You know, we do everything based on trust, right? So we don't have any letters of credit. And because we have strong relationship, you know, and so we can do it on trust. But, you know, people now say to me, well, we don't think you can do business that way. And I'm like, you know, I got 37 years of street cred saying I do, you can, right? You know, so it's like, you really have to, I mean, like I think with Anna and Anita, and the same, even with Jeannette Rankin, you know, you just have to show people, you know, we have these models we think that are so permanent, but they're not, you know, somebody created those, we're creating something new. And that's what's super exciting. And we're doing it in all kinds of ways, you know, and with all kinds of different communities involved. And that's the beauty of it.
Oh, definitely. I couldn't agree more. You know, it's, you know, moving that needle forward is always hard, but this kind of stuff that does that, it sets the groundwork. And, you know, I think there's a lot of fear around change, as you know, that's just kind of natural, and that's human nature. And when there's a few brave people that are willing to just push the needle forward a little bit and show that it can be done, it removes some of that fear, I think, for people, and makes it a little more attainable. When somebody's done it already, it's a little bit easier for people. So yeah, it's wonderful that, you know, we have these fair trade companies that are showing examples of how that can happen and demonstrating a different way of doing business. You know, that's kind of the nutshell line I use to explain our store to people a lot, is everybody in here, because even, you know, the few companies we buy from that are not fair trade certified, they're either local makers or, you know, they're very environmentally conscious makers. You know, it's at the core of it, it's everybody's doing business a little differently. They're looking at the world a little differently, and they're being creative with it. I'm curious, kind of shifting gears, I'm curious how the collaboration works. This was probably the biggest question that I got and get in the store, is how do these products come into being? Because I think there's probably a variety of ways that this happens. You know, people want to know if it's designed ahead of time and then you're employing people to make these items, or if the items are already made and you're going and purchasing them, or if there's some kind of mid-ground. Anna, you kind of touched on this a little bit with how you guys do it earlier. So maybe if you want to take this one first and just kind of talk to us a little bit about how that process works for you guys.
Yes, absolutely. So at Fair Anita, we design all of our products and then we partner with our artisan partners. And we've been really lucky. We've gotten to visit all of the groups, and we try and go on trips to work with them, because it makes such a difference to have that face-to-face connection with the artisans. So we typically send them designs. We email them. Sometimes we send them through Facebook because they don't do email. It really just varies by the group. And we email them designs. They'll make samples. We've gotten to the point where now they ship us the samples so we can see them in person, because that was one of the issues we were running into, where we would design something and like a little dainty pair of studs would end up being like this big, like a really large pair of earrings. It's made a tremendous difference to get the samples ahead of time. We still have products that come in that are just total flukes. And part of fair trade is you've already paid for it, so now you have to go out and sell it, or try to at least. Sometimes we end up donating stuff. You just never know. But yeah, so Joy, our founder, she had a design background. She had started her first jewelry company when she was 16, and she made jewelry, so she knew how jewelry was made and a lot of the technical aspects of it. And so she's our primary designer, but I chip in design ideas, and the rest of our team does as well. And it's really fun to see ideas and sketches come to life. And so, yeah, so that's primarily how we do it. Sometimes when we visit our artisan partners, like when we go to India, they'll have ideas, samples already made up, and so we'll maybe take elements from different pieces. So it depends on the group. Sometimes it's more of a collaboration, and sometimes it's strictly us sending our artisan partners designs. But we've found that we have a lot of success with selling the pieces that we've designed, so we try to stick with that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and I think that shows too, because I think when we're buying from our different fair trade vendors, there's, like I said, I think there's definitely a mix of, that process. And they're different shoppers sometimes, I find, it's not necessarily the same shopper. And I think it's good to have that diversity and that kind of those options. But I'm curious, Denise, for you guys have kind of such a wide variety in the stuff that you sell. So I imagine there's maybe some kind of mix going on there, but how does that process work for you guys?
Yeah, it definitely is a mix. So we work with, because again, I think maybe because we have all grown up together with the different groups that we work with, we know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so we really do collaborate. And so we collaborate on design. I'll just give you an example. One of the things that we do look at a lot is what materials are available. We really use only Nepali-based materials, and so and also we try to, because we're very strong environmentalists, we try to incorporate as many recycled materials as we can. And so, for example, one of our producer partners had a garage that was across the road from them that was burning these inner tube tires from trucks, and it was causing a lot of smoke and really bad air quality in the Kathmandu Valley. And so Ariel said, do you have any ideas? What do you think? He says, I was thinking maybe I would make a little bag out of this, and I said, oh, that's a good idea. And so then we started to work on some small bags made out of these inner tube tires, which are quite flexible and nice. They look a little bit like leather. And so pretty soon we put together a little collection of bags, styles between them. And he wanted to work with this small group of paraplegics that had lost some work. And so we incorporated them in to do some hand sewing work with it. And then that line of inner tube tire bags then became, the guy used to give Ariel the tires because he wanted to get rid of them. Then pretty soon the guy was like, hey, well, maybe I'm going to sell you these tires. And we said, absolutely, that's awesome. And then pretty soon we were using up all the tires he had. And so he was going out into the valley to find more tires. And so we kind of look for those win-wins where it's not, it's not just a product, but it's a product that's addressing a whole lot of different layers. And so just in that one product category, we're working with some paraplegics young men who had fallen off of construction sites and lost the use of their legs so that they could support their families. We're recycling products, we're creating new products, and products that are really usable here. So so that's what I do full time. I work with the producers full time, just trying to figure out, okay, what is a product that we can do that will use your creative abilities, also work to fulfill the needs that customers have here, but then also maybe address some environmental needs as well, or else some other different kind of level. So that's one example.
Which is amazing. Again, it kind of speaks to that kind of creative solution making to issues as they come up. It's and I love that, because it really is a win-win situation across the board, and kind of another way that makes fair trade and kind of this different way of doing business unique.
Yeah. When the earthquake happened in 2015, it was the same kind of thing, but again, it's the relationship with the stores, with the producers, with, us as, we just wholesale, but, like the weavers lost their looms. They couldn't weave anything. And so we just said to them, okay, what do you have in stock? What kind of, and so there were all these kind of wild colors, and we were like, okay, whatever, just make things, out of the stock of fabric that you have. And then because we have great relationships with the stores that we sell to, and the store owners can tell the stories, everyone said, okay, we're buying that. I don't care if it's pink, pink oven mitt is perfect. And then it worked, and so I think, I am sure with Fair Anita, it's the same way, it's like and COVID is a perfect example. We can, because we all care about each other and we're not just going to walk away from each other, we really make those things, we get creative, make it happen. I think that's pretty cool, and it's fun.
It is. That's such a great way to sum that up too, is just making it happen. People come together and do what needs to be done, which is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite parts of kind of being involved in this work. And kind of what you were speaking to, Denise, and I know that Fair Anita does some work with recycled material as well. So environmental aspects comes up a lot. Like, that's a big question for people. And I think I run into it a lot here in Missoula, because Missoula is a very environmentally conscious city. Our population is very just aware of that kind of stuff. So the question that I run into from shoppers a lot, especially since if you haven't been to Missoula, the people watching this will know this. We have an amazing neighbor store right next door. He's been there for 10 years, and everything in his store is made from upcycled materials. So, and it's such a wonderful person to have right next door. But I think as a result of that, people often have the question of, okay, well, is it really environmentally responsible to purchase items that have come from all over the world? They're shipping all over the place. And is that, what's the environmental impact of that versus buying something that was locally made from recycled materials? And so that's a question that comes up for us a lot. And I know that Fair Trade and our wholesale suppliers do a lot. So I kind of wanted to give you guys each an opportunity to share just some of the things. And Denise, you kind of already touched on that. So maybe, are there some other ways that you guys have incorporated in those kind of environmental factors into how you're doing things?
You want to?
Yeah, Denise, if you want to kind of take that first. Yeah.
Well, I think, it's a very good question. And I always do encourage people to buy local as well. But, one of the things that we've done, because we have a huge carbon footprint, everything has to be air freighted out of Nepal, because they have trade and transit agreements with India that make it quite difficult. And so what we do is we partner with Eden Reforestation in Nepal, who is actually actively working on job creation and women's empowerment and tree planting. And so with our shipments that come out of Nepal, we do a comparable amount of tree planting, funding of that tree planting. So that's one small aspect. But then the other thing that I think we have to kind of recognize in fair trade is that trade happens a lot. And so this is one way. It is not the most environmentally responsible way, but it is one way to create economic equity, so that people have the ability to then in their own lives create the kinds of communities that they want and the kind of resiliency. And so it's just a balancing thing. I mean, I'm an environmentalist, right? That is my training. And so I really always am trying to work towards that balance. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a combination of all of them. So it looks at the economic justice part. It looks at the women's empowerment part. I mean, like one of the things that we do is work with women. Well, if women have economy, women have a huge impact on the environment, right? And so like you can take a look at all of that, like if you look at Drawdown, the book Drawdown that Paul Hawkins edited, and look at the ways that, the carbon can be drawn down, one of the best things, one of the most impactful things is women's empowerment and women's education, girls' education. And so we spend a lot of our whole foundation was founded on girls' education. And then also we do all of this work with trying to get women empowered. And so that whole thing, it kind of is a wobbliness like this, but it works to make a bigger, fairer world. Mm-hmm. That's how I would say it.
That's a wonderful explanation of it, kind of that balancing act, mm-hmm. It's something I talk about with shoppers frequently, is just nothing is perfect, and so it's kind of finding the way that is most perfect for you, or what makes the most sense for you, and how to balance those things out. And I know you guys kind of do some work around this and are a little conscientious about the materials you use as well. So maybe you want to share kind of how you guys manage that balancing act on your end.
Oh, absolutely. Like Ganesh Himal, we do a lot with recycled materials and upcycled materials. We have a lot of earrings that are made from recycled saris and that sort of thing. So instead of ending up in a landfill, it turns into something beautiful and wearable. And same with tire rubber from bikes and that sort of thing. So we're very conscious with our products, making products out of recycled sterling silver. I actually have one of our best-selling necklaces is made from artillery casings, which is really cool. This is made in Ethiopia, so we have a whole artillery line, and they collect the shells, melt them down, and then turn them into something beautiful. And it's just amazing what the creativity of our artisan partners. We're also working at more sustainable packaging, because in a lot of countries, they regulate, the customs regulates how products are packaged, and so sometimes things have to be individually packaged in little plastic bags, and so we reuse those as much as we can, and we're working on having our artisan partners package them in recyclable paper bags so we're reducing our plastic usage. We also do tree planting in India with our artisan cooperatives, and we're working on a carbon offsetting program as well. So we're always growing and learning and trying to do better. But it is amazing to think, like, when a big company like Target gets a shipment, and just like all the waste that is created as a result of that. And so with fair trade, like the focus on respect for the environment and doing good by the environment, it's so critical.
It's a part of being part of the Fair Trade Federation, is that has to be one of the criteria. And, I just read an article in the New York Times about Amazon and the amount of plastic that is used, and it's huge. And so, I mean, we are always, as Fair Trade Federation members, constantly having to think about, like what you talk about with the packaging, how is it that we can really eliminate that packaging while still working within the guidelines that we're, the customs regulations and things that we're working with. But yeah, it's just and I think every fair trade company, really does take a very very strong look at that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's, I think, really interesting too, I know at least I, because I'm also, the environment is a huge thing for me. One of my favorite things to do, especially in the lead up to the holidays this year, as lots of orders are coming in, I've got all these boxes, I've got bubble wrap, is to just put a thing out on Instagram and say, who needs shipping material, And so that stuff gets a whole nother life then too, because people can come grab a box, they can pick out some bubble wrap, and it gets to go through a whole nother journey, so that stuff, the minimal packaging that does happen gets to get reused as well on our end, so I think that that just being aware of it, more so than, a bigger company like Target was mentioned, we're at least aware of it, and we're trying, and that where we can make that balancing act work, I think a lot of the fair trade companies are doing that. And it's
I know, and like we do, like my son and my husband are the best dumpster divers. We never buy new boxes. Maybe we've bought, I don't know, 100 in the last 30 years, but we always we have, Petco, we get Petco boxes, we get all these different boxes, all recycled boxes. All of the materials that line the boxes is all recycled. That's the kind of essence of fair trade. And again, that kind of creativity. It's like, we can do this, and it's not that hard, and it allows for the reuse of many, many different products.
Oh, exactly. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think the order that just came in yesterday from you guys was in a Petco box. So, which is part of the fun, like when I get these boxes in, I'm like, oh, I know it's Ganesh Himal because it's in a Petco box, and that's always the fun of it too. I always love to see that. I'm curious, and this is maybe more of kind of an inside baseball type question, but I'm curious if you guys are seeing an increase in traditional retail stores buying from you guys, or if it is still predominantly fair trade or kind of co-op type stores purchasing, or if there's been any kind of an uptick in kind of more traditional retail stores reaching out. Anna, maybe you want to tackle this first, just because because of the way you guys started, and the way that you kind of go about designing earrings. I feel like you guys are maybe tapped into that a little easier, because your designs are very contemporary. Nothing necessarily about them, looking at them, says to me, these are definitely fair trade. So I'm curious how that has worked for you guys, if you've seen an increase in that.
Oh, absolutely. When we first started selling wholesale, that was back in 2016. I think our first store was at 10,000 Villages here in Minnesota, the St. Paul store. And so we had some connections to the fair trade world, but we didn't become members until I think it was either 2017 or 2018. And fair trade stores really vet their vendors, which is a wonderful thing. And so we hadn't been in business long enough to be members of the Fair Trade Federation. And so we really got our start going to trade shows, connecting with buyers, and we would pick up some fair trade stores along the way, but it was mostly boutiques and some co-ops as we would travel the country and that sort of thing. But once we became members, it was like an overnight success. We were able to get so many new stores, and it was just an amazing thing to see. And I would say we've launched on a company called Fair. I don't know if you purchase through Fair, but we've been seeing a lot of non-fair trade stores buy from us in the last 6 months that we joined. So I would say it's a mix, but our fair trade stores are our most consistent buyers. They place orders regularly, even throughout the pandemic. Everybody was building their websites and trying to get their inventory online, and that was really incredible, whereas some of our other shops were not able to do that.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I feel like Fair, you mentioned Fair, has been a bit of a game changer this year, a little bit. I know, because we've started buying on Fair as well. And that's kind of become the way that I source anything new. A lot of it comes through that. So I'm curious, because I believe you guys are on Fair as well, Denise, about if brought in new customers for you guys as well.
Yeah, I think because our business is so relationship driven, I would say the majority of our customers are fair trade oriented. We don't do gift shows because I just can't get on a plane and do that. But we have a lot. I mean, like, stores like Jeannette Rankin, who we've been working with for 30 years, or we have a lot of stores that we've been working with for at least 20 years. So that is, I would say, the foundation of our business. Our new business mostly comes through word of mouth. And that's also really satisfying because we know that people are really looking at who we are, as well as at the products. But then this year with COVID, FTF did a great thing. They were able to, with FAIR, get people, Fair Trade Federation members, kind of streamlined onto the FAIR website. And we have seen we had a lot of interest from a lot of different stores, and that helped us through a very critical time. One of the things that we have decided to do with FAIR, however, to treat our other customers who are our regulars a little bit more fairly, is that we really take the products that we've carried for a long period of time and we put those up on FAIR, and all of the new products are really available to our old customers who come to us through our website. And that means that, not everybody in Missoula is going to have access to all of the products from Ganesh Himal. And we also try to vet people so that they're not, it's a little difficult actually, but so that they're not close together. But we're trying to, we have 1,000 different products, so we can get people different goods in their different categories. But yeah, it's been interesting. That was our first kind of venture out into kind of what would be a marketing world. And it helped us a lot. And I really am grateful to FTF for doing that, because they did help us streamline that process and getting onto, and that's why it's really important to be part of the Fair Trade Federation.
Oh,
absolutely.
Again, yeah. It's those relationships, and kind of helping metastasize those a little bit. And yeah, I know it's been really interesting here in Missoula, which again, Missoula is such a kind of unique community, a little bit. I know, and I think part of why this question kind of came up is I think people in Missoula are starting to see fair trade pop up more in traditional retail stores. I know we have several kind of smaller clothing boutiques in town that sell fair trade clothing lines, because we have not ever done a whole lot of clothing. And so other places have kind of filled in that gap, which is so wonderful to see, and I think that that's been just really great to see. And I know we have been really proud of our community to be able to see that as kind of the first touch point of fair trade in Missoula, and being able to watch that grow and see other businesses kind of dip their toes into that and hopefully kind of be a little more conscientious about who they're buying from as well,
and that's what you want. Like when we first started, people would look at us and they're like, fair what? Like, what are you doing? I don't understand. And now, I tell people, oh, we have a fair trade business. We work with artisan producers in Nepal, and people are like, oh, fair trade. Yeah, I'm always looking for fair trade. That is a completely different scenario than it was 30 years ago. And that's what it gives me a lot of hope, because when you have it entering into the lexicon and you have people beginning to shop for it, then it does become more of a normal, as long as it's not being kind of greenwashed. And that's what you want. You want that to begin to infiltrate everybody's consumer mind. It's like, well, what is my intention in buying this? It's not just to satisfy me, but it's to look at what is the broader impact. And that's huge, So yeah, I am glad to see fair trade products. I also do tell people, though, it's really great to support your fair trade stores,
Yeah. It's very interesting. I've been blown away this past year just as a fair trade retail store. And in talking with some of the other businesses, again, Missoula is such a supportive community and everybody here is very much about shopping and supporting local business. But I was blown away by how well our holiday season went. I was pretty prepared for disaster, and that's not what it was. People showed up, and we actually our sales were not down nearly as much as some of the other stores in our neighborhood even. And I think a large part of that is because of that relational component. People know the stories behind our products, or they know that they can come in and myself or one of our team is going to be able to tell them who made these earrings, where they came from, what they're made out of, and if we don't know the answer off the top of our head, we can find it out in a couple minutes, and I think that aspect of it is so huge. And it's all kind of comes back to that relationship building that, we've kind of talked about as being the main line through all of this. And without that, it's a clump of metal that's going to hang from your ear. There's nothing, it's the story that really makes it special in a lot of ways. So we're kind of getting close to our time. I want to end on this question, which came in from one of our Instagram followers that I thought was just a really interesting question to get both of your perspectives on, considering kind of the difference in length of time that you guys have been involved in fair trade and involved in this process, which is, where do you think fair trade's going? What's the future? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, of the ultimate goal is to work ourselves out of that where it's just normalized. But, are there kind of some directions you see fair trade going, or things you'd like to see happen, or just kind of anything about the future of fair trade? And Anna, maybe if you want to tackle this first.
Sure, it's such a big question, and like Denise said, it really is about working ourselves out of fair trade eventually. But it's really interesting to me. We're starting to partner with a distributor in Canada, and apparently in Canada there really aren't that many fair trade shops. There's not really much of a market for fair trade, and so I think there's so much more growth in a lot of these really wealthy countries like Canada. Australia is another one. I think parts of Europe. The US, we're so lucky that we've got lots of options for fair trade chocolate, fair trade coffee. We're really spoiled here, and so I think just raising awareness in other countries is definitely going to be something I'm looking forward to as we grow Fair Anita, and hopefully making fair trade more mainstream.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I grew up not very far from the Canadian border in Western Washington, and I had a friend that moved up there when we were in high school, and I remember going up there and going to Vancouver for the first time. I was like, Vancouver's got to have a fair trade store, because like I grew up in a house where trying to find fair trade stores was very normal. So I went up to Vancouver and I was like, they've got to have a fair trade store, right? And she was like, no, what? And just kind of being blown away that someplace like Vancouver, BC, wasn't, into that whole thing, and finding out that she almost didn't even know anything about it was very jarring. I remember that experience pretty clearly. So that's a really interesting thought about just kind of that expansion into kind of these other wealthy countries that would be able to support kind of that fair trade market. It's very interesting. Denise, I'm curious for you guys. Yeah.
I think the other thing too is I think fair trade is just gonna explode, actually. I really feel like that, and kind of the whole idea of supporting small business is gonna explode as people understand the relationship value of it. But the other interesting thing too is that not only in wealthy countries, but like one of our partners in Nepal, the Association for Craft Producers, one of the things that I've been really, really blown away by with them is that they have really worked hard to establish a clientele within Nepal for their products. And so it's about cultivating a love of Nepali weaving, of Nepali ancient block printing, of all those things. And so they have a store in Kathmandu, and they cater to Nepalis, to the kind of rising Nepali middle class. And they have done very well with that store. And that's really encouraging because, you know, Nepal is like neighbors with China. So guess what's coming in, you know, all the time across those borders are Chinese goods, very cheap Chinese goods. But to cultivate this awareness of the fact that, you know, there is such beauty in their own tradition and in their own work. And there's so many women and so many people who can be employed locally and in a good way, in a fair way, with good wages. And you know, it just creates a really beautiful, another beautiful kind of picture. So all of those places are growing their own kind of middle class, all the places where we're partnering with. And so that is a real awareness, I think, that is also changing and really, really great. And I think I think people want relationship. I think people crave it. And I think one of the things that fair trade offers is a chance to be connected. And that's not only to the environment, but, you know, to the producers, I mean, I used to say to people, you know, we used to do a lot of fairs and festivals as well. And people would come into our booth and they would pick up the sweaters and they would get this look in their eye and they would say, I can remember my grandmother doing this. And it was this sense of connection, you know, and I thought, gosh, we can do that. You know, handwork and all of that is such a human connecting force. So I think fair trade is totally here to stay. I mean, it may become kind of normalized, but it's kind of like, you know, environmentally sustainable products. You know, it's like, that's not going to go away. These are the realities these are the things we want to pull into our lives, not push away. And I think more and more people are wanting to pull them into their lives and understand them than push them away. So your job, Carol, is just going to be busy.
Well, I think that's, you know, what you were saying about the connection. I think if there's one thing that I think all of us have taken away from this last year is the importance of connection with everything. You know, and I think if there was one positive lesson to take away from this last year, it's just the connectivity of everyone and the importance of those relationships, the importance of local small businesses. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yes, I think fair trade.
And the impact is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. You know, I've seen multi-generational impact now. I've seen women who who have a first grade education take all that money and have their daughters get master's degrees and have those daughters come back and work with them. And, you know, it's phenomenal, you know, the change that happens in one generation when you just give people the opportunity to do, you know, what we all want to do, which is be treated fairly, you know.
Right. Oh, that's
so beautifully said.
Mm-hmm. It is. I can't think of a better way to end this on. I mean, I want to thank you both so much for this conversation. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully everyone watching also kind of learned a lot, or at least their curiosity is piqued enough to go ask more questions. But yeah, I want to thank you both so much for joining me in this little conversation.
Thank you both for being part of our community.
Yes, this has been lovely. Thank you so much.